So there are several things about this story in the Bible where Jesus was at a table, and Mary came and put the ointment on his feet and washed his feet with her hair, and some other people were there and some other things happened. But for the moment, I just imagine this circle of light, this quiet moment before a meal might have happened, where Jesus was actually reclining, not sitting at a table. I think they reclined in those days. I don't know exactly how they ate reclining. I guess you still have one hand free. But there they were reclining at the table, and you know, if you're reclining at the table, your feet are probably a little bit more obvious than when you're sitting at a table and you can tuck them carefully underneath. And so it shouldn't be too surprising that there might be rituals around foot washing related to meals. Also, given hygiene and plumbing of the day, it might have been important for a lot of reasons that people had rituals around the feet. So there she was, kneeling at Jesus' feet, Mary, and she took this very expensive bowl of ointment or perfume or something. I don't know what nard is exactly, but I kind of imagine that it wasn't like perfume like we think about, but more like an oily substance. I hope it smelled good. And she put it on his feet. Now it says in the story, a little bit later, well, part of the reason, and of course, you know, she gets challenged by Judas, who says, why are you spending money on the perfume? Why isn't the money being spent on the poor? And then at the end of the story, there's this little bit about, you know, Jesus is going to die. And this act might have been related to that reality. But even without that story, if we just stand back and look at this particular moment, here is this spot related to this table, related to this meal, where for just a moment, someone is taking care of Jesus' feet. And I don't know about you, but you know, when someone is rubbing my feet, it feels pretty good. And that those waves of sensation move through the whole body. And for a moment, Jesus wasn't healing someone or having to preach to someone or doing all the things that he was doing, taking care of these 12 disciples that sometimes were running off in the wrong direction. For a moment, someone was taking care of him. Our theme this year for Lent is room at the table. And each Sunday we're going to take a story that has to do with a table where Jesus was, and to look at the story and see what it has to say to us. And each of these Sundays will have a kind of a related theme. Today, it's the table of rest. The table of rest. And so here is this moment before they're having this meal where Jesus is being taken care of, and he just gets to relax for a moment because Mary was there to take care of him. Now, it made me think a little bit about tables in general and gathering at tables and gathering at meals. And, you know, I think that there are a bunch of things that we do when we gather at the table, especially when we're doing that in any kind of special occasion, that there are a bunch of things that we do that are related to hospitality that I think have to do with creating a place of rest. So what are the things that we do when we gather at the table to make everyone feel welcome, to make everyone feel included, to make everyone feel like they're at home so that they can relax? And I realize that sitting around the table isn't just about eating. It's about gathering as a community in a place where perhaps for a moment we can relax. I don't think it's like Downton Abbey. I don't think those people ever relaxed at the table. And even though I'm kind of fascinated about that idea of the turn, I don't know how many of you are watching this series, but you know that thing at formal dining tables where the hostess at one point is talking to the person on this side, and then they have the turn she turns and begins talking to the person on the other side. And everyone at the table does the same thing. Now, I suppose that was also their way of creating hospitality. Like, you would hate to be at a table where you were sitting and the person next to you was always talking to the person on the other side. I've been at those tables. As an introvert, I always have to stick myself, especially if there are large groups of people, eating together with large groups of people. I have to say, it's not really my thing. And as an introvert, I find I have to place myself right in the middle of the side of the table to have any chance of getting in on the conversation. I don't know if this is a problem with any of the rest of you, but it's mine. And so, what are the things that we do, to create that sense of hospitality? And as Marvin was sharing his poems, I just was flashing on, especially my mom's side of the family. These were farm people in northern Indiana, and we lived in Bloomington, which was 3 hours away from these folks in northern Indiana, but we would go up there a lot, and we would particularly be up there for holidays, and there were big meals, and there were family reunions, and I had, an Aunt Flossie and an Aunt Etna and an Aunt Gail. These were my grandmother's sisters, and these were people that women who would have worn those those dresses with the tiny print, floral prints, and the blocky shoes, and the men had, tans down from here, and then from up here it was white, and these were the people that we gathered with at the table. And there was, these were simple people, but there was never a lack for food. There was always plenty to eat, wonderful good food, and a lot of people gathered around the table. And I think about the table that comes to my mind most often, which was at the home that I grew up from about 4th grade till I went away to college. And it was one of those ranch-style houses in a quarter of an acre in a subdivision just outside of the edge of Bloomington, Indiana. And it's, kind of a long house, spread out house, and not all that big, but there was kind of a living room area here. This was the more formal living room, the one that we never sat in. We always were in the family room with the couch. And then, there was a little leg over this way, and the dining room table was over here. So not a separate dining room, but, just attached there. And there was a big table. And those were the places we had all our family meals. And my father, of course, would be sitting at the head of the table. I think my parents would probably sit at both ends of the table. And my father had kind of a corny sense of humor. And there were these phrases that he would just use over and over again, kind of these little jokes that he would just repeat. And of course, we kind of all cringed every time he said them. So for example, he'd say, "Could you pass the cut glass milk pitcher?" Which of course referred to the cardboard milk carton on the table. And at some point in the meal, he would have to say, "Could someone pass me another roll because my butter and jelly haven't come out even?" And of course, at the end of the meal, pretty much every one of those big meals, he would say, "I hurt good." And I think that he was offering a place of rest. He was offering hospitality just by this ease and these kind of silly little things, which of course now I remember because he said them over and over again. But I think that was just another way that he had for making the people around the table feel comfortable. We did not practice the turn at our table. The conversations went like that all the time. So what does it mean to come to this table of rest? What does it mean to come to God's table of rest? That place where any one of us might recline, where any one of us might have our feet anointed, where any one of us might be made to feel not only comfortable but held in the deepest and most profound way. What would it mean to be anointed? What would it mean to be able to rest in knowing that God was present with us, That God had called us to this table, this great table of humanity, where we were supposed to live together in peace as brothers and sisters. This complicated, complex, sometimes messed up world. But for a moment, each and every one of us might feel held, might feel that place where we can just let go. I'm not sure if we're exactly the people of letting go. I think a lot of times we're the people who think we have to hold it together. Not only for ourselves, but for everyone around us. But what might it mean for us to let go? And as they say, to let God. I may be the last person to advise you on how to rest, because I seem to be a busy person. And yet, and this is probably the deeper wisdom, each one of us needs to find out how that works for us. It's not going to be the same for each of us. Some of us find rest in taking that nap, just like Rachel did. Some of us find rest in a book. Some of us find rest in nature. Some of us find rest in doing something quietly with our hands where we can let our minds drift. So even though I'm busy, I have a lot of ways that I know for myself that create rest. And then I think about all the people who don't have the luxury or the place even to rest. A number of years ago, I was doing a series of interplay events at St. Mary's Center, which is a center that for homeless, mostly seniors dealing with a lot of challenges, poverty and mental illness and addiction. And they had a homeless shelter program. And the people there had a place to stay, and then they also had some of these classes and things that were offered, and we were doing an interplay class. And I started to realize that with these folks who came in the evening, they would come in at 4, and then they had to leave after breakfast, that in that time in between, they had little place to go. They didn't have a comfortable chair someplace where they could relax. Every time I see someone sleeping on a bus or on BART, I think, this may be the only place they have to rest. And I just want to invoke those people who may not have that luxury of rest and wish that for them. But also to continue to invite us all to find that for ourselves and with God. What would it mean to rest at God's table and to know that we're going to be taken care of? This morning we're going to invite you to participate in a ritual of anointing if you choose. We've got some bowls of oil here. Three of us will be standing down here. If you want to come forward and get a little anointing on your forehead, or just reach out your hands and we'll anoint your hands, just as a reminder that we too can be taken care of, that we too can receive this blessing in the same way that Jesus received that blessing from Mary. That as responsible as we are, and will continue to be, that for a moment we might let go. So I invite you to come if you feel called to do so.